Aara Willington had made a lot of questionable life decisions moving to a country where she didn't speak the language, accepting a catering shift at a gala where the napkins cost more than her rent, wearing shoes that were slowly and deliberately murdering her feet. But the worst decision she made all evening, the one that would unravel the next 6 months of her life completely, was smiling at the wrong man. She didn't even mean to. She was tired. Her feet hurt. She'd just finished telling Jian a joke about a duck, and she still had the tail end of a laugh on her face when she turned and found him standing there still, dark-suited, watching her like she was a problem he hadn't solved yet. She smiled because it was reflexive, because her mother raised her polite. He looked at her like the floor had dropped out from under him. Weird, she thought, and kept walking. She had no idea he'd bought her building by Thursday. His name was Kang Dae-won, and the night Aara Willington smiled at him by accident. He had attended 7 galas this quarter, and had not once felt anything resembling a human emotion at any of them. The Gilded Gala was the most expensive of the lot. The air smelled like money and ozone. $5 million worth of chandeliers. Champagne at $5,000 a glass that nobody was actually drinking. The room was full of women who had been told, in various subtle and unsubtle ways, that he was the most dangerous checkbook in Seoul, and they had arranged themselves accordingly beautiful, deliberate, aimed. He had been halfway to the VIP corridor when she cut through the crowd. She wasn't aimed at anything. That was the first thing he registered. She was carrying a tray of still water, and she was moving fast and slightly unevenly, the walk of someone whose feet had been hurting for 3 hours and had stopped apologizing for it. There was the tail end of a laugh still on her face from something that had happened just before she turned the corner. She caught his eye, gave him a smile that was not for him, not strategic, not practiced, not placed. It was reflex. The smile you give something in your path before you step around it and keep moving. She kept moving. He did not. His hand, which had been reaching for his phone, stopped midair. His heart, which ran at a steady 60 beats a minute with the reliability of an instrument he had never once had to think about, kicked against his ribs exactly once with a force that was both physical and unreasonable. The sound cut out of the room. That is the only way to describe it. Not quieter out. The full orchestral noise of 500 people performing wealth, gone. And in the silence, for a fraction of a second that felt nothing like a fraction of a second, the gala flickered. He didn't see tuxedos. He saw a tree he had never stood under. He saw a figure in deep, warm red, laughing at something just outside his field of vision. Then the sound came back, all of it at once, and he was standing in the Gilded Gala with his hand frozen over his phone, and the server with the water tray was already gone, swallowed back into the crowd. His assistant Min-jun materialized at his elbow with the precision of a man who had been watching this from 6 feet away and had not understood a single second of it. "Sir." Kang Dae-won lowered his hand. "That server." His voice was completely neutral, which took more effort than it usually did. "The one who just passed. Find out who she is." Min-jun looked around the room with the expression of a man performing a task he could not fully explain to himself. "Which one?" "There are." "The one with the smile." Min-jun did not point out that several servers were smiling. He had worked for Kang Dae-won for 6 years and had a very well-developed instinct for which observations to keep internal. "I'll find her," he said. If you're already feeling something for these two, you are not alone and you need to stick around, because what happens next is going to completely change how you see both of them. Don't go anywhere. Where are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications bell for more amazing stories that would blow your mind. Let's continue. Few days ago, Aara Willington had made 3 questionable decisions. The first was agreeing to a catering shift at the Gilded Gala Seoul's most aggressively expensive annual charity event because her friend Ji-yeon had begged her, and the pay was triple her usual rate and her rent was not going to pay itself. The second was wearing heels she had not broken in yet, a decision her feet were currently processing with what she could only describe as grief. The third was the duck joke. She had been telling Ji-yeon a joke about a duck that walks into a pharmacy, and she had not quite finished the punchline before they had to split back to their assigned sections, which meant she was still smiling that slightly stupefied smile you get when you know the punchline is good, and you can't wait to deliver it when she turned the corner carrying a tray of still water and walked directly into the sightline of Kang Dae-won. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know anything about him yet. She just knew he was tall, dark-suited, and standing very still in the middle of a room full of people who were all trying extremely hard to be looked at, and he was looking at none of them. He was in his own world completely. Until she walked past. She caught his eye the way you catch anyone's eye in a crowded room briefly, accidentally. The kind of eye contact that means nothing, that you forget about before you've even fully processed it. She gave him the reflexive smile she gave everyone, a little tired, a little apologetic for existing in his path, genuine in the way that things are genuine when you're not thinking about them at all. And then she kept walking. She did not notice that he had stopped moving. She did not notice that his hand, which had been reaching for his phone, had gone completely still in midair. She did not notice that for approximately 4 seconds, Kang Dae-won, a man who controlled 9 companies across 3 countries, a man who had been described by 3 separate business publications as the most dangerous brain in Asian finance, a man who had once sat through a 15-hour hostile negotiation without once changing his expression, looked like someone had hit him in the chest with something heavy and invisible. She was already gone, back into the crowd, tray balanced, shoes murdering her, thinking about the duck joke. He stood there. His assistant, Min-jun, appeared at his elbow 11 seconds later, having clocked the stillness the way a person clocks a sudden change in weather. Min-jun had worked for Kang Dae-won for 6 years. He had seen a lot. He had never seen this. "Sir, that server." Kang Dae-won's voice was completely neutral. "The one who just passed. Find out who she is." Min-jun blinked. "Which one?" "There are. The one with the smile." Min-jun looked around the room. There were 11 servers currently in view. Several of them were smiling. He wisely did not point this out. "I'll find her," he said. Kang Dae-won nodded once and finally put his phone in his pocket and walked toward the VIP corridor, which is what he had been trying to do for the last 6 minutes. But the world looked slightly different than it had before. He couldn't have told you why. He was not a man who trusted things he couldn't explain. He ran his empire on data and precision, and the kind of cold logic that made other men in his industry either respect him or be terrified of him, sometimes simultaneously. He did not believe in fate. He did not believe in signs. He barely believed in coincidence. But somewhere underneath all of that, in some part of him, he had long learned to keep quiet, something had just woken up. And it was the kind of waking up that feels less like a beginning and more like a recognition. Like finding a room in your house you didn't know existed. Not new, just forgotten. He didn't examine it. He filed it. He went into the VIP room and shook 3 hands and negotiated a stake in a shipping company while simultaneously thinking about a pair of tired eyes and a smile that hadn't been aimed at him at all. It was, he thought, a very inconvenient evening. Aara Willington had moved to Seoul 8 months before the gala because she had run out of reasons to stay in London. That sounds dramatic. It was a little. The honest version. She had a degree in fine arts, a genuinely good eye for color, and a stubborn conviction that she was supposed to be here in this city, in this chapter of her life, even if she couldn't fully explain why. Her mother thought she was having some kind of extended artistic crisis. Her father had funded exactly 1 semester of the experiment and then gone diplomatically quiet. Her grandmother, who was the only person in the family with genuine faith in Aara's instincts, had pressed a chunk of savings into her hands and said, "Go find what you're looking for, baby. Just don't be stupid about the rent." She was trying very hard not to be stupid about the rent, which was how she ended up doing catering shifts 3 nights a week while she built her portfolio and applied to galleries and ate an amount of instant ramen that she was choosing not to think about too carefully. She shared a small, slightly crooked apartment on the 4th floor of a building in Mapogu with Ji-yeon, who was a nursing student and the funniest person Aara had ever met, and together they had created a small, functional, occasionally chaotic life that Aara genuinely loved. Ji-yeon had found Aara on a flatmate finder website 8 months ago and had texted, in Korean followed by a translated English version because she had checked the profile. "Hi. I need someone who won't eat my leftovers without asking and will occasionally watch bad TV with me. Also, the apartment is small and slightly cold in winter, but the landlord says he's working on it, which I believe 0%. Are you interested?" Aara had written back, yes to all of this. Also, I'm a visual artist, so there will be some mess. Fair warning. Ji-yeon had replied, I dissect things for class. We'll be fine. They had been fine. Better than fine. Ji-yeon taught her to navigate the local market, corrected her Korean pronunciation with the patience of someone who found it genuinely amusing rather than frustrating, and had the specific quality of presence that made a shared space feel like a home rather than just a cost-split arrangement. The morning after the Gilded Gala, Aara woke up with feet that felt like they had personally betrayed her, ate leftover rice standing over the kitchen sink, and forgot entirely about the man in the dark suit. He did not forget about her. Min-jun had her name by 11 a.m. Aara Willington, 24, British Nigerian, on a standard work and study visa, fine arts graduate, current occupation, freelance catering and aspiring visual artist. Social media, minimal and mostly pictures of her work. No red flags. No connections to any of Kang Dae-won's enemies, business rivals, or complicated histories. Just a person. Kang Dae-won read the file twice. Set it down. Picked it up again. What do you want to do? Min-jun asked. It was a genuinely good question. Kang Dae-won was not entirely sure. He had requested the file under the pretense that it was a security check. The gala had been a sensitive event, and it was not unusual for his team to run background checks on staff. The full truth was harder to look at directly. The full truth was that in the 12 hours since the gala, he had woken up 3 times from dreams he couldn't quite remember, except that they had been warm and dusty in a way that felt nothing like Seoul and nothing like his life. There had been the sound of wind through trees he didn't recognize. There had been laughter that felt more like a memory than a dream. He was a man of logic. He did not dream vividly. He did not wake up thinking about servers at charity galas. These were facts about himself that he had relied on for 32 years. Nothing, he said, which was his way of saying, not yet. He had her file on his desk for 9 days before he opened it again. He first saw her a second time at a coffee shop in Hongdae. He was not following her. That is important to establish early, mostly because the timeline of what he was and wasn't doing in those first few weeks is genuinely complicated, and the line between happening to be somewhere and ensuring he was somewhere got blurry faster than he would like to admit. But the coffee shop was genuinely coincidental. He was there for a meeting with an architect whose studio was 2 blocks away. Aara was there because it was Tuesday, and on Tuesdays she worked at the coffee shop's back tables for 3 hours because the light through their east-facing window was perfect for her sketchbooks. He walked in and saw her at the back table with a sketchbook open and a cup of coffee that had clearly gone cold and a pencil tucked behind her ear, and he stopped in the doorway so suddenly that the person behind him walked directly into his back. He moved. He ordered. He sat down at a table on the opposite side of the room. He told himself he was not going to stare. He was spectacularly unsuccessful at this. She was drawing something he couldn't see from where he sat, but her face while she drew was completely unguarded, the face people make when they think nobody is watching. Open and mobile and present in a way that is almost startling after a room full of people performing. She frowned at her work. She smiled at it. She chewed the end of her pencil and then looked faintly disgusted with herself for doing it. He watched her for 20 minutes. His architect arrived, and Kang Dae-won, who could normally dissect a floor plan in 6 minutes flat, spent the entire meeting 3 beats behind, nodding at things he hadn't fully heard, because some part of his brain was still sitting at that back table watching a girl argue with her own sketchbook. He left without speaking to her. He was back in his car when Min-jun, sitting in the front seat with the professional blankness of a man who had learned to see nothing, said, "Same building management company owns 6 properties in Mapogu." Kang Dae-won said nothing. "One of them has a lease up for renewal in 30 days, Min-jun continued. "The building on Walsanaro." That was her street. Kang Dae-won knew this because he had read her file 3 times and had a very precise memory that he occasionally found inconvenient. "The management company," he said. "What's their asking price?" Min-jun told him. Kang Dae-won thought about it for approximately 4 seconds. A man with less self-awareness might have told himself this was a good investment opportunity. Kang Dae-won was honest enough with himself to know it wasn't about the investment. "Make an offer," he said. He owned her building by Thursday. He had facilities management send someone to fix the elevator on Friday. It had been broken for 2 months, a fact he had learned from her file, which mentioned she lived on the 4th floor. He had the heating system properly serviced for the first time in apparently 4 years. He had the lobby repainted in a shade that was less aggressively depressing. He told himself this was property management. He was the only one who believed this. Minjun said nothing. Minjun had the survival instincts of a very intelligent man who understood that there were conversations his employer was not ready to have, and he was not going to be the one to start them. Aara noticed the elevator working and told Ji-yeon it was a miracle. Ji-yeon said it was probably the new management company and did a brief celebratory dance in the kitchen. Neither of them thought about it further. Meanwhile, Kang Dae-won was discovering something uncomfortable about himself. He had always been a man who solved problems. Something was wrong, you identified it, you developed a response, you deployed resources, you resolved it. This was how everything in his life worked. It was a system that had served him extraordinarily well for the last 15 years, ever since he had walked out of the ash heap of what his father had left behind and started building something of his own. The system did not appear to work on this. He knew her name, her address, her visa status, her educational background, her approximate income, and the coffee shop she preferred on Tuesdays. He had ensured that the building she lived in was warm and functional. He had done what felt, to his particular logic, like the reasonable version of caring about someone's well-being. He still woke up from warm, dusty dreams he couldn't place. The dreams were getting more specific. There was always a courtyard. The light in it was the long golden light of late afternoon in a summer he had never lived through. There was always the sound of water, a fountain or a river nearby. He could never tell. And there was always her, not as she looked now in paint-stained sweatshirts and borrowed shoes, but wearing something in a deep warm red, her hair loose, laughing at something just out of his field of vision. He never saw her face clearly in the dream. He never had to. He always knew it was her. He was 32 years old, and he had never had a dream he didn't understand, and he was finding this profoundly destabilizing in a way he refused to discuss with anyone. He started working later, sleeping less. He threw himself into a particularly brutal acquisition that required 18-hour days, and the kind of focused hostility that made his staff give him a wider berth than usual. He was trying, in the most Kang Dae-won way possible, to outrun something. It wasn't working. And then, 6 weeks after the gala, 3 weeks after he bought her building, Aara Willington walked into the gallery opening of a photographer named Park Soo-hyun, an event Kang Dae-won attended because Park Soo-hyun was the kind of name you needed to be seen supporting a cultural capital investment, and she walked through the door in a rust-colored dress that matched the thing in his dreams so precisely that he went completely still in the middle of a sentence. The man he had been speaking to, Lee Jae-hyuk, one of Seoul's most senior investment bankers, watched him go silent mid-word and turned to see what he was looking at. "Do you know her?" Lee Jae-hyuk asked. "No," Kang Dae-won said. This was technically true. It just didn't feel true. It felt like the opposite of true. It felt like the truest lie he had ever told. Across the room, Aara was examining a large format photograph of a Moroccan market, black and white, all shadow and geometry, with the same focused expression she had worn in the coffee shop. She was alone. She had a glass of wine she wasn't drinking. She was entirely absorbed in what she was looking at. She looked, Kang Dae-won thought, exactly the same way she looked in the dream. Present. Whole. Not performing for anyone. He made a decision. He was going to speak to her. Not because of the dreams. Not because he owned her building. Not because of any of the tangled, inexplicable things that had been building in him for 6 weeks. He was going to speak to her because he was Kang Dae-won, and Kang Dae-won did not hide from things. He ran toward problems. He gathered data. He made assessments. This was just another assessment. He crossed the room. He stopped beside her in front of Park Soo-hyun's photograph of the Moroccan market, and he stood there for a moment because he did not actually have an opening. This had never happened to him. He always had an opening. Openings were currency in his world, and he was very rich. He said, "The geometry is wrong." Aara turned to look at him. Her expression was politely questioning, the face of someone who is about to engage with a stranger's opinion and has not yet decided whether the stranger deserves it. "The geometry," she said. "The shadows." He nodded at the photograph. He's framed it as if the market is the subject. But the real subject is the woman in the back left corner. You can barely see her. If he'd shifted 2 degrees left, she would have been centered in the shadow gap and the whole thing would have worked. Aara looked back at the photograph. Was quiet for a moment. He knew, she said. Knew what? That she wasn't the subject. She tilted her head slightly. The market is suffocating her. That's the point. If she'd been centered, you'd have been looking at a portrait. Instead, she's almost invisible. You feel it before you see it. That's harder to do. Kang Dae-won looked at the photograph again. She was right. He had looked at it as a composition problem. She had looked at it as an emotional one. They were 2 completely different ways of seeing the same thing. He turned to look at her. She was looking at the photograph, not at him, still thinking it through. You're an artist, he said. Trying to be. She glanced at him then, a quick assessing look. You're a collector. Sometimes. What kind? The kind who gets things wrong occasionally, he said. Something shifted in her expression. A very small thing, the microscopic recalibration people make when someone has surprised them. I'm Aara, she said. Dae-won, he said. Not Kang Dae-won. Not the full name with the full weight of everything it carried in this city. Just the 2 syllables. He had not introduced himself that way since he was maybe 20 years old. She nodded, looked back at the photograph, and said, If you want to see good geometry, there's one in the back room. South wall. He actually got it right in that one. She walked toward the back room. He followed. They talked for an hour and 40 minutes. He didn't clock it in real time. Time in his life was normally accounted for with the precision of a ledger, but Minjun told him afterward, with the careful neutral expression of a man filing something away for future reference. An hour and 40 minutes, sir. Kang Dae-won said nothing. It hadn't felt like an hour and 40 minutes. It had felt like no time at all. Which was another thing about Aara Willington that defied his experience of the world. She didn't fill silences. She didn't perform. She asked questions that were genuinely curious rather than strategically aimed. She disagreed with him twice, once about the photographer's use of negative space, once about whether a piece of abstract work in the far corner was bold or just confused, And she disagreed the way someone disagrees when they actually think they're right and don't particularly care if you agree. Nobody disagreed with Kang Dae-won. Or rather, nobody disagreed with him out loud, with confidence, while holding a glass of wine they still hadn't drunk and looking at him like his opinion was interesting but not necessarily correct. He found it, and this was the specific word that came to him, which he examined later with some suspicion. Refreshing. She didn't ask what he did. This was so unusual, he almost brought it up himself. Toward the end of the evening, as the gallery was beginning to thin out, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yes. You've been watching me since before you came over. At the first photograph, I saw you." He was very still for exactly 1 second. "You saw me. I have good peripheral vision." She wasn't accusing him. She was just stating it, with the calm of someone who has decided to say the thing directly rather than around. "I figured you'd either say something or you'd leave. You said something, so." She paused. Was the geometry comment real, or was it just a way in? He thought about lying. It would have been easy. He was very good at it. "Both," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, not the reflex smile from the gala, not the polite stranger smile. This one was smaller and more private, the smile of someone who has received an honest answer and is choosing to do something with it. "Okay," she said. "Okay, what?" "Okay, both is a fine answer." She set her still full glass of wine on a nearby table. "I should go. I have an early shift tomorrow." "What kind of shift?" "The kind where I carry things for people who don't notice me." She picked up her bag. "It was nice talking to you, Dae-won." She left. He stood in Park Soo-hyun's gallery and watched her go and thought, with a clarity that was not quite comfortable, "I am in a significant amount of trouble." Here is where things got complicated. Not between them, not yet. What got complicated was inside him. Kang Dae-won did not have relationships. He had encounters, occasional and brief and contained, with women who understood the parameters and had no interest in anything beyond them. He had agreements. He had alliances. He had, if he was being honest with himself, a small handful of people whose company he genuinely valued: Min-jun, his corporate attorney Ha Young-soo, a childhood friend named Choi Sung-woo, who ran a restaurant and had no interest in finance. But none of that was what you could call emotional closeness. He had built his entire life on containment. His father had been a man of unchecked impulse, and the wreckage of that impulse had been the inheritance Dae-won had actually received, not money, not connections, but a very clear education in what happened when a man let himself be moved by things. His father had loved too hard, trusted too easily, spent what he didn't have, and ended his life with nothing except debt and a son who had decided, at 19, in the rubble of all of it, that feeling things was a liability he could not afford. He had kept that promise to himself for 13 years. He was now lying awake at 2 in the morning thinking about a girl's smile and a gallery conversation and the specific way she tilted her head when she was thinking, and it felt less like interest and more like something structural shifting. Like a wall that had been load-bearing for so long that you'd stopped seeing it as a wall and had started just thinking of it as the architecture of the room, and now something on the other side of it was pressing. He called Choi Sung-woo at 7 the next morning. Sung-woo picked up sounding like someone who had been asleep since the restaurant closed at 2 a.m. and was not thrilled about this. Is someone dead? Sung-woo said. No. Are you dying? No. Then why are you calling me before 10 on a Wednesday? Dae-won was quiet for a moment. I met someone. A beat. Then, I'm awake, Sung-woo said. I'm completely awake. Say that again. I met someone. At Park Soo-hyun's opening. An investor? No. Another beat. Longer this time. Dae-won. Sung-woo's voice had shifted into a register that was somewhere between delighted and genuinely concerned. Are you telling me you met a person? Like a human person that you have feelings about? I'm not discussing feelings. You called me at 7 a.m. I'm discussing a situation. Right. Sung-woo was clearly sitting up in bed now, fully invested. Describe the situation. Dae-won described, as concisely as possible, the gala, the coffee shop. He left out the part about buying the building, the gallery, the conversation. Sung-woo listened without interrupting, which was notable because Sung-woo never listened without interrupting. When Dae-won finished, Sung-woo said, Do you want to see her again? Yes. Does she know who you are? She knows my name. That's not what I asked. Dae-won was quiet. Because that's going to be the thing, Sung-woo said, and his voice was gentler now, less teasing. That's always the thing with you. The moment she finds out what your name actually means in this city, the companies, the reputation, what people say about you, she gets to decide if she's scared of it or not. And you don't get to control that. I know. Do you? Sung-woo. I'm serious. You've spent 15 years making sure people only see what you want them to see. If this girl actually sees you, like actually, you don't get to manage it. That's how it works. Are you prepared for that? Dae-won didn't answer. He hung up and sat with the question for a long time. He didn't have an answer yet. But he knew, with the same precision he brought to everything, that the question was the right one. He found reasons to be in Hyundai on Tuesdays. He was honest with himself about this. He did not pretend they were accidental. He had Min-jun move 2 meetings and schedule a site visit nearby, and on the 3rd Tuesday, he walked into the coffee shop, and she was there at the back table with her sketchbook, same cold coffee, same pencil behind her ear. She looked up when he came in, and something in her face shifted, not surprise exactly. More like the face of someone confirming a suspicion. You come here on Tuesdays, she said. Sometimes. This is my Tuesday spot. I know. He had not planned to say that. It came out before he could stop it. She stared at him for a moment. You know, you mentioned it at the gallery. The coffee shop with the good east light. He nodded toward the window. You were right about the light. This was true. He had remembered it, filed it, used it. Whether she had actually said it at the gallery or whether he'd only known because of her file, he was going to be a lot more careful about what he admitted knowing from this point forward. She looked at him for a long moment with a look he was beginning to recognize, not suspicious exactly, but watchful. Like she was reading something between the lines. Do you want to sit down? She said. He did. He bought his own coffee. He sat across from her. She went back to her sketchbook without ceremony, and he responded to emails, and they sat in the same general silence that two people occupy when they've decided, without saying it, that each other's company is acceptable. After about 20 minutes, she said, without looking up from the sketchbook, "Do you always watch people this carefully?" He had thought he was being subtle. He was apparently not being subtle. "It's useful to know how people operate," he said. "And what have you learned about how I operate?" He considered this seriously because she deserved a serious answer. "You don't work until you've set up the environment. You adjust the table, the angle of the sketchbook, the position of your coffee, before you touch the pencil. You have a system and you're not bothered that it looks fussy from the outside." He paused. "When something in the sketch isn't working, you don't erase it. You incorporate it. You work around the mistake until it becomes part of the logic." She looked up. Her expression was doing the recalibration thing. "That's accurate," she said. "You do the same thing in conversation," he said. "When something surprises you, you don't reject it. You sit with it." She was looking at him with something in her eyes that was more careful than what had been there before. Not guarded, she was rarely guarded in the straight wall way, but attentive, like she was revising something. "What does it say about a person," she said slowly, "that they can read someone they've met twice? That they paid attention," he said. "Or that the person is worth paying attention to." She held his gaze for a beat. Then she went back to the sketchbook. But at one point she turned it around to show him something. A loose, gestural sketch of the window, the light through it, the way it caught the dust in the air, the street outside fractured into geometry. "This is what I mean about East Light," she said. "It's honest. West Light is beautiful. East Light just shows you what's actually there." He looked at the sketch, then at her. "What medium do you work in?" he said. "For your actual work?" "Mostly mixed. Paint and collage. Sometimes I incorporate photography." She pulled the sketchbook back. "My process is kind of chaotic. I collect things, textures, images, scraps, and then at some point everything I've been collecting kind of announces itself and becomes a piece. I don't always know what I'm making until it's already made." That sounds, he searched for the word, uncomfortable. She laughed. It was a very good laugh, quick and genuine, no performance to it. "It is a little. But the work is better when I don't force it." She looked at him curiously. "You don't work that way." "No." "What do you do?" He told her. Not everything, not the specifics of what Kang Dae-won Enterprises actually involved, not the industries, not the scale, not the parts of it that lived in the gray zones that powerful men occupied in every city in the world. He told her he ran a company, investment and development, that he had built it over the last 13 years from something very small. "What was the something very small?" she asked. "An inheritance I mostly didn't receive," he said. She looked at him like that answer meant something, like she was filing it away in the same way he filed things. That must have been a strange start. It was clarifying, he said. She nodded slowly. Something in her expression told him she understood this more specifically than most people would, that she knew something about starting over from an unexpected place. He wanted to ask her about it. He didn't. He had learned, in these Tuesday conversations, that Aara gave things in her own time. Pushed, she went quiet. Given space, She opened like a room filling with light. Those Tuesdays became the fixed point of his week. Not loudly. He didn't rearrange his whole life. He wasn't a person who rearranged his whole life for anyone, but quietly, specifically. Tuesday morning meetings got moved to Monday. Tuesday afternoon calls got pushed to Wednesday. Minjun noted the pattern in the same way he noted everything, silently and with complete internal awareness. On the fourth Tuesday, she brought him a photo she had taken with her phone on the walkover. Just a frame of a wall where two different colors of paint had chipped in a way that made them look like a mountain range scene from above. "Tell me what you see," she said. He looked at it. "A real estate maintenance problem," he said. She looked deeply unimpressed. "And," he said, "the impression that a long time and weather can make something that nobody planned." She tilted her head. "Better. Do I get a grade?" "Not yet," she said, and took the phone back and added the image to a folder with 30 other photographs he couldn't see. He found that he genuinely wanted the grade. He was, without entirely meaning to, learning her. It took 4 weeks of Tuesdays and 2 more accidental on-purpose encounters, once at a street market in Insadong where he was genuinely looking for a gift for Ha Young-soo and she was genuinely browsing for collage materials. And once at an outdoor film screening where she was with Ji-yeon and he was with Sung-woo, and the 4 of them ended up sitting together in the dark watching a French film none of them had seen before he suggested, clearly and without pretense, that they have dinner. She said, "Like, you're asking me to dinner?" "Yes." "On purpose?" "Yes." She looked at him with that particular combination of amusement and assessment that was, he was learning, her default register when he said something that surprised her. "You're kind of strange, you know that?" "I've been told. You watch people very carefully and then you're suddenly very direct. It's a weird combination." "Is it a problem?" She thought about it for a second. "I'll have dinner with you," she said. "But I want to pick the place." He agreed, expecting somewhere expensive, somewhere designed to impress, somewhere that reflected the ambition she was clearly working toward. She took him to a small Korean barbecue restaurant in Mapogu that had no sign outside and about 12 tables and served pork belly that was, he had to admit when they were 20 minutes in, genuinely perfect. "You come here often," he said. "It's 2 blocks from my apartment." She was turning pork belly on the grill with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times. The owners are this older couple who've been running it for 30 years. They gave me free soup once when I looked too tired and now I can't eat anywhere else. He looked around the small, busy room. Thought about the last dinner he'd actually enjoyed in this city, some architectural showpiece of a restaurant where the food was secondary to the experience and the experience was primarily about being seen. "This is better," he said. "I know." She handed him a piece of pork belly. "Here. Don't let it get cold." He took it. It was, in fact, perfect. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You keep asking if you can ask things. It seems polite. It's a little formal." She poured them both water. "Just ask." "Why Seoul?" She was quiet for a moment, in the way she went quiet before she said something real. "I had this feeling," she said. "I know that sounds vague. But it was specific? Like, not just, I want to go somewhere new. It was Seoul in particular. I don't speak Korean. I didn't have a job lined up. I had very little money, and I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be here. She paused. My grandmother told me to trust it. And do you? Trust it now that you're here. She looked at him across the small table with the grill between them and the smoke from the pork belly rising in the warm air, and said, more than I did before. Something in his chest did a thing it had no business doing. I have that sometimes, he said, surprising himself. A feeling about a direction. I never have a full explanation for it, but it's never been wrong. What does it feel like when it happens? He thought about this. Like recognition, he said. Like something you've known for a long time but forgot. She was looking at him in a way he hadn't seen before. Quieter. More careful. Yeah, she said. Exactly like that. He walked her home. It was 2 blocks, which was nothing, and she didn't invite him up, which he hadn't expected, and when they reached her building, she stood on the front steps and looked at him. The elevator works now, she said. I heard. First time in 2 months. I've been carrying my groceries up 4 flights. She tilted her head. New management company fixed it, apparently. That's good, he said. Neutrally. With the precise neutrality of a man hoping very hard that a subject will move on. She looked at him for just a moment too long. Yeah, she said. Good night, Dae-won. Good night, Aara. She went inside. He stood on the street for a moment before turning back toward where his car was parked. He did not feel, for the first time in months, like he was trying to outrun anything. But wait, because right when things feel like they're settling, something is about to surface that changes everything. Keep watching. Here is a thing about Kang Dae-won that is important to understand. His world was not safe. His world had never been safe. He had built an empire. Yes, 9 companies, significant assets, the kind of name that opened rooms before he even walked into them. But empires of the kind he had built, in the way that he had built them, did not exist in clean legal daylight. There were agreements in his history that had been made in rooms without cameras. There were men in his orbit who operated in ways that were, as his attorney Ha Young-soo put it, carefully beyond conventional parameters. He had never been charged with anything. He had never been convicted of anything. He had also never been fully clean, not by the standards of the ordinary world, and he knew this. He had made peace with it because the alternative, the inheritance he had actually been left, the debts, the ruin had seemed worse. But the world he moved in had teeth. And men with teeth noticed when something changed. When a constant variable suddenly became unpredictable. His name had been linked over the years with 3 or 4 women. All brief. All controlled. None of them had ever mattered to anyone watching him because none of them had been real enough to use. He had been having dinner, twice a week now, in a small restaurant 2 blocks from a woman's apartment for 6 weeks. He did not know how long it had been visible. He found out on a Wednesday morning when Ha Young-soo called and said, in the very specific voice she used when something required his immediate and complete attention, we need to talk about Park Ji-cheol. Park Ji-cheol was 61, controlled 3 construction companies and a logistics firm, and had been trying to acquire a stake in one of Kang Dae-won's shipping subsidiaries for 2 years. They had reached something of an armed standoff, each man with leverage the other didn't want public. What about him? Dae-won said. His people have been asking around, Ha Young-soo said. About a British girl. An artist. Lives in Mapogu. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Asking around, he repeated. 3 different people in 3 different contexts. It's not casual curiosity. She paused. They know she's connected to you. They don't know how yet, but they're building a picture. He said nothing. Dae-won. Ha Young-soo's voice was measured. You know what this means. He knew. He had known abstractly from the first Tuesday he walked into that coffee shop on purpose. He had known the way you know a fire hazard exists in a building you choose to live in anyway, not forgetting it exactly, but choosing not to let it dictate the terms. How long do I have before they have enough? He said. Before they can use her as leverage? A week. Maybe 2. She paused. Or you end the connection now. Cleanly. Before it becomes anything they can hold. He sat with this. I'll handle it, he said. Which way? He didn't answer. He ended the call. He sat in his office for a long time. The view from his window on the 38th floor was the whole city, not a metaphor, literally all of it, the river and the bridges and the layered thousands of buildings pressing against each other. The city that had chewed through his father and that he had spent 15 years learning to navigate on his own terms. He had one rule, one real rule, that had governed everything since he was 19. People he cared about were a liability. Full stop. Not because he was cold. Because the world he moved in was the kind of world that found what you cared about and used it. He had never let himself care about anything he couldn't afford to lose. He looked at his phone. Thought about calling her. Thought about what he would say. Thought about her at the barbecue restaurant turning pork belly on the grill with the ease of someone at home, the blue paint stain on her wrist, the way she laughed. He put his phone down. He had to make a decision. But the thing about decisions made by logic, when the logic is fighting something older and deeper, is that they don't always stick the way they're supposed to. He picked up the phone. He called her. Hey, she said. She sounded like she was in her studio. He could hear faint music in the background, something with strings. I was just thinking about you. Were you? He said. I found this photograph at a market today. It's this old print from somewhere in West Africa. I can't identify where exactly, and there's a courtyard in it with this particular light, late afternoon. And I thought of, she stopped. Sorry, that's a weird thing to say. No, he said. The word came out before he could stop it. You thought of something? He thought of the dreams. The courtyard. The late afternoon light. The sound of a river or a fountain nearby. What does the courtyard look like? He said. She described it. The dusty stone. The tree in the corner. The shadows going long. He closed his eyes. Dae-won, she said. You still there? I'm here. He breathed. The photograph, can I see it? I mean, yeah, I was going to use it for a piece, but I can. I want to see it before you cut it up. She laughed. Come by the studio then. Saturday. He should say no. He should make a clean break, do it with gentleness and clarity, say something about being too busy, let the distance build naturally before Park Ji-cheol's people had enough to use. Saturday, he said. Her studio was a rented room on the third floor of a building in Yeonnam-dong that smelled like turpentine and old wood, and the particular kind of creative chaos that happens when someone has been working in a space long enough for it to become genuinely theirs. The walls were covered, not decoratively, but functionally, covered in the way working artists cover walls, with prints and color swatches and torn-out images, and her own work at various stages. He stood in the doorway and looked at it all. She was already inside, clearing a work table to make room for him, wearing paint-stained overalls and no shoes, and she said, "Don't look too hard at anything on the wall. It's all still embarrassing," which told him immediately that it wasn't. That she was protective of it the way you're protective of things that matter. He looked anyway. He looked carefully. Her work was, he searched for the right word, and the right word surprised him. Raw. Not unfinished, not rough. Raw in the way that honest things are raw. There were layers to everything, images half visible under paint, torn edges incorporated rather than hidden, colors that shouldn't have worked together building into something that did. She was saying something in the work, specifically, about preservation and loss, about things that survived and things that didn't. He looked at one piece in particular. Mixed media, paint, and what appeared to be fragments of old letters and a piece of fabric, dark blue. There was a figure in it, not quite visible, present in the negative space. "What's this one about?" he said. She came to stand beside him. Was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother," she said. "She passed last year. Before I moved here." She paused. "She was the one who told me to come. She never got to see any of this." He looked at the piece for a long time. "She'd have liked it." "You don't know that." "The work is honest," he said. "People who give good advice are generally people who value honesty. You got it from somewhere." She looked at him sideways. "That's a very clean piece of logic. I have a lot of those." She smiled, and this time the smile had something layered in it, warm, a little sad, the kind of smile that costs something. "Yeah," she said. "I think she'd have liked it." She showed him the photograph from the market. It was exactly as she had described. The courtyard, the light, the tree in the corner. He held it and felt the same thing he felt in the dreams, the recognition, the sense of something old and specific surfacing. "Where did you find this?" he said. "Random vendor at Wanghak Market." He had a whole box of old prints, didn't know where any of them were from, just selling them by the stack. She looked at the photograph in his hands. "Why? Does it mean something to you?" He thought about how to answer this. "I dream about a place like this," he said. He had not planned to say it. He said it anyway. "I've been dreaming about it for months." A courtyard. Late afternoon light. She was very still. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "Describe it." "Everything you remember." He described it. The dust motes. The tree. The sound of water. The long shadows. He did not describe her in it. The figure in the warm red. The laughter at the edge of his vision. When he stopped, she was looking at him with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Something that was more than surprise and less than fear and was, he thought, very close to recognition. "I dream about a courtyard too," she said. The studio was very quiet. "Since you moved to Seoul," he said. "Since before." Since maybe a year? A little more. She wrapped her arms around herself slightly. I always thought it was, I don't know, a memory of somewhere I hadn't been yet. A memory of somewhere you hadn't been yet, he repeated. That sounds crazy. No, he said. It doesn't. They stood there in her studio with the afternoon light coming through the windows and the smell of turpentine in the air and the photograph between them, and something that had been building for months was very close now to the surface. He looked at her. She looked at him. Dae-won, she said. Who are you? Like, actually. And this was the moment. This was the exact moment when, if he was going to be the man who protected her by keeping her at a distance, he should have said something gentle and vague and let the whole thing dissolve. Instead, he said, Do you want the version that fits on a business card or the real one? The real one, she said immediately. The real one is complicated. I assumed. It might scare you. She looked at him with a steadiness he found almost frightening. Try me, she said. He told her. Not everything, not the specific details of the gray areas, not the names of the men his world involved, not the particular nature of the pressure currently being assembled by Park Ji-cheol's people, but the shape of it. The kind of world he moved in. What his name meant in Seoul. What it had cost to build. What it meant, practically, to be close to him. She listened. She didn't interrupt. Her expression didn't flicker. When he finished, she said, And you're telling me this now because you asked for the real version. And because he stopped. Because if I don't tell you now, you'll find out later in a way that's worse. She was quiet for a long moment. Are you dangerous? He thought about the honest answer to this. To people who move against me, yes. To me? He looked at her. I would rather, he stopped again. The words felt inadequate in a way that was new for him. He was a precise speaker. He didn't usually run out of adequate words. I would rather be the safest thing in your life, he said. Whether I can be that or not is a different question. She absorbed this. The building, she said slowly. In Mapogu. He said nothing. The management company that fixed the elevator. She was watching him with that watchful look. Your company. Still nothing. You bought my building, she said. Yes. She closed her eyes briefly. Dae-won. I know. She seemed to search for the right word. That's a lot. I know. You bought my entire building. The heat hadn't been serviced in 4 years. That's not, she pressed her lips together. Was quiet for a moment. Then, did you do anything else I don't know about? He thought about this carefully. The lobby paint. The lobby, she stared at him. You repainted the lobby. It was a very depressing color. Oh my God. She turned away, walked 3 steps, turned back. She wasn't angry exactly, or if she was, it was the kind of anger that lives right next to something else, and he wasn't sure yet which way it was going to go. What were you trying to do? Solve a problem, he said. I wasn't a problem. No, he said. You were the opposite of a problem. And I didn't know how to, he stopped. Looked at his own hands for a moment. I don't have a normal language for this. I don't have a way of doing this that's ordinary. So I did what I know how to do, which is remove practical obstacles and ensure your circumstances are functional, and he stopped again. Looked up at her. It was wrong. I should have just told you. She looked at him for a long time. You're the strangest person I've ever met, she said. I know. You also fixed my elevator. She seemed to be weighing something, which I genuinely was losing my mind about. A pause. That doesn't make it okay. I know. But she exhaled. It's the most someone has done something completely backwards to try to take care of me. She looked at the floor. My grandmother used to do things like that. Not by buildings, but sidestep the actual thing and address the practical circumstances around it. He was quiet. I need to think, she said. Okay. And you need to tell me everything. If there's more I don't know, I need to know it. Okay. And the building thing. If you want me to sell it, I'll sell it. She stared at him. You'd sell it. Tomorrow. You'd sell an entire building because I asked you to. Yes. Something in her expression shifted again. The complicated thing, the one he was learning to read, that meant she was recalibrating something. Don't sell it, she said. But fix the crack in the stairwell on the second floor. It's been there since before you bought it and it's genuinely a hazard. Done, he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. Saturday dinner, she said. You're paying. And you're going to answer every question I ask you. Yes, he said. Even the uncomfortable ones. Especially those. Saturday dinner was 4 hours and 14 questions, some of which he answered fully and some of which he answered as fully as he could without crossing lines he wasn't ready to cross yet. She was a precise questioner. She didn't ask vague things. She asked specific things, and she remembered what he said and came back to it when the details didn't quite fit. She was, he thought, the most genuinely intelligent person he had been around in a long time. Not in the MBA finance board table way that he was used to. In the way of someone who read the room and read between the lines and had a very good sense of when she was being told a version of the truth. At one point she said, "You're still not telling me something." Several things, he said. Some of them because they're not ready. Some of them because they'd put you in a worse position to know. She looked at him across the table. Do I need to be worried? He thought about Park Ji-cheol. The week or two he had before they had enough. The decision he had not made yet. Not right now, he said. But possibly. Possibly. She was quiet. Okay, she said. Then you tell me when I need to know. I will. Promise me. I promise. She nodded. Picked up her fork. The food is getting cold, she said. He told her on a Thursday. He had 48 hours, Ha Young-soo had said. Not a week, not 2. 48 hours before Park Ji-cheol's people had assembled enough information to use. He called Aara at noon and said, I need to see you tonight. I need to tell you something. Okay, she said immediately. No drama, no preemptive worry. Just, okay. My place, he said. I'll send a car. She arrived at 8. She was wearing jeans and the paint-stained sweatshirt, and she had her studio bag over her shoulder because she had apparently come straight from work. There was the smear of blue paint on her wrist. He had spent the afternoon preparing. Not decorating, not performing, preparing. He had thought through what he needed to tell her, in what order, with what level of detail, and he had thought through what her possible responses were and what he would say to each of them. He was, in retrospect, nowhere near prepared enough. He told her about Park Ji-cheol. About the inquiry. About what it meant when men in his world started asking questions about someone connected to him. He told her what it could be used for, what the specific risk was, what his attorney had advised. She listened with the focused, quiet stillness she had when she was processing something serious. When he finished, she said, "So I'm a leverage risk." "That's how they see it, yes." "And your attorney's advice was to cut contact." "Yes." She looked at him. "And you didn't?" "No." "Why?" He had the precise answer ready. He had prepared it. Something about needing to give her all the information to make an informed choice. Something about her right to know. What came out instead was, "Because I don't want to." The room was quiet. "I'm aware that's not a strategy," he said. "No," she agreed. "I have a strategy. The strategy is to accelerate the pressure on Park Ji-cheol from a different angle. I have leverage of my own, and I've been holding it in reserve. If I deploy it correctly," he backs down. "It takes time. Maybe 3 weeks. And in 3 weeks? If I've done it right, he no longer has interest in you as a resource." He paused. "It's not a certain outcome." She looked at him for a long time. "You've been protecting me since before I knew you," she said. "Elevator. Heat. Lobby paint. And now this." She paused. "Who protected you? Before you had enough power to protect yourself." He hadn't expected that question. He didn't have a prepared answer for it. "Nobody," he said. She nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She was quiet for a moment. He waited. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Okay." "I've had that dream again. 3 times this week." She looked at her hands. "The courtyard. And this time I saw you in it. Not clearly. But it was you. You looked like you had been waiting for a long time." He said nothing. "I don't know what that means," she said. "I know it sounds crazy. I know there's no logical. I've been dreaming about it since the night I met you," he said. "Since the gala." She looked up. "Since before I spoke to you," he said. "The dream started the night I saw you across a room for 30 seconds. She was very still. "I don't believe in things I can't explain," he said. "I never have. But I've been dreaming about a courtyard and a woman in a red dress and a late afternoon I've never lived through. And I met you at a party and the world went silent, and I have been trying to explain it through logic for 4 months and I cannot." Dae-won. "I'm not saying it means anything specific. I'm not saying I believe in past lives or fate or—" "I have a birthmark," she said. He stopped. She reached up and pushed the collar of her sweatshirt aside. On the left side of her neck, just below the jaw, was a small jagged mark, pale against her skin, in a shape that was oddly specific. Not round, not smooth. Jagged, like a scar. He looked at it. Looked at his own left wrist, where he had had a faint scar for as long as he could remember. Not an injury he recalled, just something that had always been there. Young-soo had once joked that he must have been in a duel in a previous life. He turned his wrist over. She looked at it. They both looked at the same shape, in the same place on opposite sides of a body, separated by 30 years of different lives in different countries. Neither of them said anything for a long time. "Okay," she said finally, and her voice was a little unsteady in a way it very rarely was. "Okay." I think we need to talk about what we actually believe. I think you're right, he said. And then you're going to tell me what your full plan is for Park Ji-cheol. Yes. And I'm going to tell you whether I think it's good enough. He looked at her. You're going to critique my strategy. I'm an artist, not an idiot. She pushed her sleeves up. Walk me through it. He walked her through it. She listened and asked 3 questions, 2 of which he had already considered and 1 of which he hadn't, and the one he hadn't pointed at a vulnerability in the timing he had overlooked. He fixed it in his head as she spoke. When she finished, she said, "That's better." "Thank you," he said, and meant it completely. "You're welcome." She paused. "I'm scared," she said. Not dramatically. Just as a fact. I want you to know that. I'm a lot more scared than I'm showing. I know. But I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her. I found the courtyard, she said. I'm not walking away from it because some old man with a grudge wants to use me as a chess piece. She met his eyes. But you have to promise me something. Anything. No more unilateral decisions about my life. No more buying buildings without telling me. No more, she gestured vaguely, logistics of care that happen without my knowledge. If you want to take care of something, you tell me first. Yes, he said. That's a real promise. Not a strategy. I understand the difference, he said. Yes, I promise. She nodded, settled back in the chair, looked around his penthouse, the vast, immaculate, carefully curated space that looked, she said once, like a beautiful room that nobody lived in yet. You should get some art, she said. I've been thinking about that. Don't buy anything famous. Get something that means something. She glanced at him. Or something that means something to someone. That's usually how you tell. I know someone, he said. She smiled. Yeah, you do. The 3 weeks were the hardest weeks of his professional life. Not because the leverage play against Park Ji-cheol was complicated, it was, but he had done complicated before, but because for the first time in 15 years, there was something he was doing all of this for. Not for the companies, not for the empire, not for the architectural precision of winning. For a person. It changed the weight of everything. He caught himself on the 3rd morning calculating risk not in terms of what he stood to lose financially, but in terms of what it would mean if it didn't work. If Park Ji-cheol decided to push rather than fold. If the counter-pressure he had assembled wasn't as airtight as Ha Young-soo believed. If something happened to Aara because he had decided the leverage play was safer than a clean break. He had never done risk calculations that felt like this before. Numbers he ran about companies were abstractions. Clean and manageable. This was different. This felt like the difference between calculating the weather and being outside in it. He worked 18-hour days. He barely slept. Minjun started leaving coffee on his desk without being asked, which was a measure of how visibly wrecked Dae-won appeared, since Minjun was not a person who anticipated needs without prompting. There were 3 days in the middle of it where he didn't call her, not because he was pulling away, but because the situation required a complete focus, and he knew himself well enough to know that her voice would undo his concentration. She texted on day 2, still here. Go do what you need to do. He looked at that text for a long time before he put his phone away. He wasn't sure how she had known that was exactly what he needed to hear. He hadn't told her. He had just gone quiet, and she had read the quiet correctly and sent him the exact message, not "I miss you," or "Are you okay?" or any of the things that would have cracked open the very tightly sealed compartment he needed to keep shut for 11 more days. Just, still here. Go do what you need to do. He held his empire together with precision and pressure and the particular cold efficiency that had always served him, and he thought about her and he did the work. On day 14, Park Ji-cheol's people made a small overture, not a retreat, but a sideways movement, testing whether the pressure was real. He held his position. A Young-soo told him this was the inflection point, that how he responded in the next 72 hours would determine which way it went. He responded exactly right. On day 22, the call came. Young-soo called Dae-won and said, "It worked." "I know," he said. "You're welcome, by the way. I was the one who actually made the call." "I know," he said. "Thank you, Young-soo." A pause. "She must be something," Young-soo said. Not unprofessionally, just the single observation of a woman who had watched Kang Dae-won operate for a decade and had never once seen him take a risk that wasn't fully calculated. This had not been fully calculated. And she knew it. And he had done it anyway. "Yes," he said. "She is." He called Aara. She picked up on the second ring. "It's done," he said. She exhaled a long, slow breath that told him how much she had been holding. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Are you?" "Fine. Good." A pause. "I have something to show you." "The piece?" "Come see." He went to the studio. She had finished it, the piece she had been working on since the photograph from the market, the one with the courtyard in it. It was large, covering most of one wall, and it was the most fully realized thing she had done. The courtyard was there, not photographic, not literal, but unmistakable in the way that truths are unmistakable through layers of interpretation. The late afternoon light, the tree, and at the center, in the space where the shadows went long, two figures, barely suggested, facing each other. Not touching, just close. The distance between them, the specific distance of people about to stop being strangers. He stood in front of it for a long time. "This is the best thing I've ever made," she said behind him. "I know that sounds arrogant." "It sounds accurate," he said. "It's not for sale." "I know. But I wanted to go somewhere it means something." She paused. "I was thinking, you said your place doesn't feel lived in yet." He turned to look at her. She was wearing paint on both hands now, up to the wrists, blue and ochre and a dark red that was almost the color of the dream. She looked completely herself, completely here, completely present. "You're saying you'd give me this," he said. "Not give," she said. "It lives somewhere and you live there. It's different." She tilted her head. "Plus I'll be coming by to see it, so." He looked at the piece. Looked at her. "Aara." He stopped. "Tried again. There is no part of my vocabulary that is built for this." She came to stand beside him, looking at the piece. "For what?" "For you," he said. "For what this is." "I don't have words that fit what." Dae-won. She looked up at him. Her eyes were steady and warm and entirely the same in real life as they were in every dream he had ever had. "You look like you've been looking for something for a very long time." He was very still. "Did you find it?" she said. He looked at her, this woman who had walked through a room at a party carrying water, who had smiled at him without aiming it at him, who had argued with his opinions and asked hard questions and spotted the vulnerability in his strategy and refused to leave when leaving would have been easier, who dreamed the same courtyard, who had the same mark. "Yes," he said. She smiled. Not the reflex smile, not the polite stranger smile, not even the small private smile from the gallery. The real one. All of it. Open and unguarded and here. "Okay then," she said. "Let's figure out the rest." There was no clean ending. There wasn't supposed to be. Because clean endings are for stories that are finished, and this one, the empire that still moved in gray areas, the man still learning to let something matter. The artist who had followed a feeling across the world and found exactly what she was looking for without being able to name it. This one was just beginning. Park Ji-cheol redirected his interests, but the world they moved in was full of men like Park Ji-cheol, and there would be another one eventually. Dae-won was honest about this. He told her on a night in late November, walking along the Han River with the winter coming in off the water, that the choice to be with him was a choice that had to be remade every time something new surfaced. She told him she understood the terms. She told him she had followed a feeling from one continent to another with no money and no language and no guaranteed outcome, and if she was the kind of person who made decisions like that, he could probably trust her to make this one. He didn't argue with this. The painting went on the wall of his penthouse. The room, Minjun noted in the way he noted everything with professional non-expression, began to look like someone lived in it. Jiyeon met Sungwoo at a dinner in December, and they argued loudly about the correct way to make doenjang jjigae for 45 minutes, and then exchanged numbers with the energy of two people who have found a worthy opponent. The crack in the stairwell on the second floor was repaired on a Tuesday. Aara left a note for the maintenance crew that said, "Thank you. You have no idea." She had no idea they reported directly to Kang Dae-won, who read the note, folded it once, and kept it in his desk drawer. In January, she had her first gallery showing in Seoul. Small, in a space in Itaewon, 15 pieces on the walls. He attended, deliberately, as himself, full name, full presence, not hovering in a corner, but standing in the room, in front of her work, being seen there. 3 people photographed them together. He had known they would. "You know what's going to happen now," she said quietly as they stood in front of the courtyard piece she had loaned the gallery for the show. "Yes. Your name will be in the caption. Yes. People will look at me differently. Yes." He looked at her. "And what do you want to do about that?" She considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all of them. "Nothing," she said. "I want to do exactly nothing about it. I want to stand here next to you, in front of this painting, and let them photograph whatever they want." She paused. "I know who I am. I know what this is." The caption doesn't change either of those things. He looked at her for a long moment. "You're a terrifying person," he said. "You keep saying that. I mean it as the highest possible compliment." She smiled and turned back to the painting. Somewhere across the room, Minjun stood quietly near the door, watching the two of them, and allowed himself, just briefly, with the small private expression of a man who had been waiting for this for a very long time to smile. Outside, Seoul went about its business, enormous, indifferent, full of the specific noise of a city that has seen everything and will see more. Inside, in a small gallery in Itaewon, a woman who had crossed the world on a feeling stood next to a man who had stopped the world for a second to understand what he was recognizing. And they looked at a painting of a courtyard that neither of them had ever visited in the lifetimes they remembered. The late afternoon light, and it was perfect. It always had been. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something during that elevator moment, that studio scene, that 2 a.m. confrontation, then there is so much more where this came from. Like, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. We release new stories every week, and they are all built exactly like this one, for the feeling that something important is happening and you cannot afford to look away.